So then we are back with the more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Mashiach laid waste for many centuries. As we read it in Yeshayahu the prophet, mostly the 61st chapter explains the life of the Hamashiach ben Yosef. Very important topic, because truly Yod-Heh Vav-Heh Yeshua spoke through this particular person known as the Ben Yosef, or the son of Joseph, and this being the promised prophet spoken of by Moshe. He was always concerned regarding the coming of the Spirit. But then there was a period of time where then Vaikra, the first section, was then properly explained previously by the prophets. Now the situation is, the nation itself was many centuries without the presence of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh in a holy temple, because the Ark of the Covenant was stored in the cave of Yirmiyahu, and then it was the dark period of the nation, because they only had the prophets. Now there was a reason why Shaliach Shaul quoted many words of the Hamashiach ben Yosef, and there was a reason he said, from any of those functions of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, try to focus and understand prophecy. There was a reason for it. In Romans 12, he mentions regarding the renewal of the mind with the holy instructions. Now, they didn't have any of the New Testament writings. They only had the Tanakh, the Torah, the writings, the prophets. But then later on, when Shaliach Shaul said prophecy, then we begin to trace back what the Hamashiach ben Yosef spoke of. And his objective was making sure people were prepared for the coming of the dispensation, where then these people would be the sent ones. But then a lot of people during the time of the Hamashiach ben Yosef, as people are today, if any person comes and explains the holy instructions, they simply shrug their shoulders and, always saying if the Hamashiach would come around and explain the instructions, they would certainly believe it. No, they would not. That's why then, when the Hamashiach ben Yosef gave the understanding of Lazarus and the situation regarding the rich man being in flames, and then the unfortunate was then in the bosom of Abraham. And that's what these days people were searching for: money, prestige, popularity. So if the Hamashiach ben Yosef would come around these days, people would not listen. They would not even know how to identify. Most people don't even read the Word. Most people don't read the Torah, don't read the writings, don't read the prophets. They don't read any of it. In fact, they only link the divine with the amount of money they make. Now comes the Hamashiach ben Yosef, solely talking of the holy instructions. People wouldn't listen. But then when the Hamashiach ben Yosef explains of salvation, it is conditional. Now, the presence of Yod He Vav He is eternal. But people, human beings, they are only on a path when they condition themselves on walking on a path of Yod He Vav He. Now, expecting the Spirit coming around and then leading them on a path, it's not shown in the original manuscripts. People have a tendency of thinking of this God as an outlaw spirit. Then if you are walking or if you are not walking, if you are on the path, if you are not on the path, then you are saved anyway. But Shaliach Shalul, known as Paul, he was talking about a walk with the divine. So it is conditional. The very word is implying it. So this situation of, if you go to a religious establishment or if you don't, you are saved anyway, that's absolutely not true. So the Hamashiach ben Yosef, when he spoke of the holy instructions, mostly, he was emphasizing the importance of understanding the original manuscripts from the time of the first tabernacle service and the first temple. For a very long time, the nation was outside of these understandings, and that's why when the Hamashiach ben Yosef came, he was a huge light, because Yod He Vav He was re-explaining the instructions from previous times in the past. So then, salvation is conditional. Now, Melech David has said that he desires staying on the path of the divine every day, every time. Though his objective in life was not become king or melech, yet he was named as, but it was not the purpose of Yod He Vav He Gibor. In fact, in Hebrew, any function that you read from content and context, you don't find Yod He Vav He Melech. Now you make a nice reading from the instructions when you read, for instance, and then the people made him as Melech. That's not the same as himself saying he is the Melech. Because what people wished was a worldly government. So then when the Hamashiach ben Yosef was talking regarding salvation, he was talking about Yod-Heh Vav-Heh Yeshua. So in order for a person to understand salvation, Yod-Heh Vav-Heh Yeshua is walking on the path of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, and in itself is Yeshua. So it's absolutely 100% conditional. Now it doesn't mean that people does not make mistakes. But we don't have self-restraint when people are involved in dirty situations. They cannot expect to be saved. So then, sections of Shaliach Shimon, for instance, sections of Acts of Ruach HaKodesh, the visions of the centurion in Acts, there are lots of bits and pieces of the translation that truly was not in line with the original manuscripts. Now, some of these are found in Acts, and some of these are found in the recordings of the Spring Feast. Now then, Cornelius stating he saw a vision of angels and going up and praying. That's absolutely a pure lie. He never saw any angel. He never had transcendent experience in the spirit. That was a Roman invention. Now, principles of observing the spiritual world is found in Enoch. It's found a section from Ezekiel, Daniel. And these were very popular during the time of the Hamashiach ben Yosef. However, they were not being used in a proper way. They were making money out of this information. Now, it's not making money given the proper information, it's twisting them around and deceiving the people. That's what the world mostly is repleted of. Dishonest people. Now, this particular section of Acts, we find in Cornelius involved in a very peculiar situation. Because Cornelius is involved with the culture of the Hebrews in the dispensation, and as we understand, the first, at the very least, 10 years, 10, 15 years of the faith during this period of time was only exercised by the original Hebrews. There were no Gentiles that came to the faith until we find in Cornelius. And then, at the first experience, they had a transcendent understanding from the spiritual world. And he was a centurion. from what we understand from the Roman records, you cannot, under any condition, be on active duty and proclaiming any other divinity than the Caesar. Now that's where then the stupidity of the people play a big role, and they want to make sure a situation is transcendent and spiritual, and then they start taking God of their own and they put in front of history. That's how ignorant some of these people are. Now, the basic understanding in the Roman army, you cannot have any other deity than the Caesar. Similar situation is in Revelation. Johannes sent to the island, and from there, from the caves, then he was writing Revelation. There is a certain amount of stupidity when the people don't spend the time reading the instructions. They begin to take their own character, their own self from the work they do. And that's the whole danger of salvation. So then, when we are talking of Cornelius, he did not have any vision from heaven. First, the only way he could have stated what he stated, and the situation points that he was retired. You cannot be on active duty in the Roman army when you say and you are involved with other religions, and most often religion that was not paying taxes. Second, himself going up and praying and then saw visions, and this is a Roman fabrication. The main point of the situation is Shimon. He was a sent one. He was a shaliach. So then the Romans wanted to put their scripture in front of the Hebraic scripture. They came up with this character. Now there was a certain man in Caesarea, a centurion, whose name was Cornelius. From that band of soldiers, there is named then Italica. Okay. Now there was a certain man in Caesarea, a centurion. Centurion is a person that leads 100 men, whose name was Cornelius, from that band of soldiers. Band of soldiers. Interesting. It doesn't say it was a regiment or any kind of a military name. It says only band of soldiers. Band of soldiers. Yeah. And he was righteous. Why do we understand of righteous? And he feared Elohim. Elohim is a generic title, mostly, because it's related with L-O-R-D. That's an English title. Because the English Bible became popular during the time of the English Empire, as it was popular during the Greco Empire. That's why the translation was from Hebrew to the Greco language. Now then, he was reverenced this Elohim in his household. And he did many alms among the people. And he was talking of Elohim. And then this man, Cornelius, saw an angel of Elohim in a vision. 9 hours into the day, who came towards him and said, Cornelius. And he was afraid and stared at him, and he said, What? And then the angel said to him, Your prayers and your alms have come up before Elohim for a remembrance. And I'll send men to the city of Joppa and bring Shimon, who is named Kepha. Behold, he lodges in a house that is on the shore of the sea. Now we have a reverse of situations. You have angels then talking with army people from some sort of soldier that cannot say any words against the Caesar. Now he's promoting this new deity, highly prohibited. And then because he was given alms, and in other words, he was helping the unfortunate, giving shoes, giving provisions, giving clothing. And then the next thing we know, an angel showed up to him. Interesting. And then the angel said, Go there and visit with Cornelius. And not only this, and then the angel himself said to go there in Joppa and then visit with Shimon. Now our understanding is when Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is doing his work as in a condition of Ava, and then later on describing what function he's speaking of depending on the content and the context, most often he uses his own or people of the faith rather than otherwise. Now having a vision of heaven and angels, that's extremely unlikely. But the Greco-Roman translation is spiritual, is transcendent. It makes absolutely no sense. So then the situation of your prayers and your alms have come up before Elohim for the remembrance. And I'll send men to the city of Joppa and bring Shimon, who is named Kepha. Behold, he lodges in a house that is in the shore of the sea. And the angel who spoke with him had departed. So, very unique situation. Now, the translation, the Greco-Roman translation, when talking of a centurion from the band of soldiers, back in those times, the retired people from the army, they have their own tiny cities. And once again, people don't spend the time studying. So there you find an absolutely blunt, straightforward scoundrel of a lie. Angels, they don't show up to people without a knowledge of the instructions. That's as plain as direct and can ever set. They simply don't. The divine always uses people, not angels. So the rest of the situation is placing focus on a person who had never had any experience in the Spirit. That's why you have the writings of Yashar. Now then, these points of a very important fact of condition. Salvation is conditional. That's why then Shaliach Shaul has said in Romans 12, condition your mind of maintaining the path. Renewing of your mind, true. How would you renew your mind if you don't take old information and then replace it with new information? Then you are aware of this new information, you begin to do what it says. That's maintaining the path. And then Shimon, of course, he was in the city, and then he saw this big, huge cloth coming down with many beasts, and then Yod-Heh Vav-Heh explaining for him to eat. It's another weird situation. Because Yod-Heh Vav-Heh is never going to make this request. Come and eat what is unclean. It's another ridiculous point. Because when Yod-Heh Vav-Heh is doing his work, he simply observes the intent of learning the instructions. So rather than having these eating animals and beasts and bugs or whatever else had in this piece of cloth, when the divine talks, he points out his instruction. Step A, B, and C. First, if he wants to become part of the nation, he must understand that there are principles in the Torah, in the writings, in the prophets. And then this Cornelius was the first Gentile that came to the faith during this period of at least 10 years after the Mashiach ben Yosef was gone. From the scripture, it is the first Gentile. Now, a Gentile that doesn't talk of the holy instructions but has some sort of angelic experience. Very interesting. Now, people, when they read, they are so low in understanding of secular situations. People don't even know who was the Caesar of the time. Now they spiritualize everything, And while Shimon was entering, Cornelius met him, and he began to worship him. Now listen to this. If an angel shows up, the very point of a person should not do is to bow down to any person. So the text in itself already shows flaws. So Cornelius did not have any vision. But people want to believe it. They want to believe there was some supernatural situation, and there he is. He bowed down to the person, and you shouldn't be doing this. Now, did the angel show up to him? No, of course not. So these stories are repleted with novels and ways of not to study the instructions, not to study the scripture, not to study the Tanakh, the Torah. And they go along with these spirits, and then you ask them to give their personal testimony, besides their own link with the divine. Most of the content, it makes no sense. Now, Shimon was very specific. And behold, we that are involved stated they should desire and hear whatsoever was order to you from Elohim. No, that's what the instructions are for. If Cornelius was truly an obedient person, he wouldn't bow down before Shimon. It already shows flaws in this entire story. And since we understand there are conditions of walking on a path, this is a blunt mistake of the Greco-Roman translation. Unfortunately, they were writing things that made no sense. Not from the Hebrew perspective. So then the Hamashiach ben Yosef, when he was talking of the presence and the dispensation, later on people were so tied up with their own doings, their own makings, their own work, their own self-identity from what they do, rather than reading the scripture and studying and inviting other people to study. And then they get the sense of self only from work. And they only want the hand of the divine to give them more and more and more and more and more, and there is no ending. That's why it came a point where the Hamashiach ben Yosef start talking in parables. Because whatsoever the Mashiach said directly, they would try to use for their own gain. So next time, I'm going to evaluate more of the Hamashiach ben Yosef said regarding this, because a lot of these acts of Ruach HaKodesh truly does not line up with the Hebrew text. And since these people, they were Hebrews, you find content with the Hebrew names doing un-Hebrew actions. The name is literary activity. In other words, plain, blunt, junk lie. Only to deceive the people that they have some sort of presence of a spirit that is beyond, transcendent, and above, even to the point of destroying the instructions. So the Hamashiach ben Yosef did not come to destroy, he came to complete. And when people come around and then destroy it, they want to leave it the way they want, and they wonder why the morals are so bad, why people are so conniving at the system. Relationships are busted more than 70%. And they do the same things expecting other results. So, next time I'm going to evaluate more of these particular topic from the Hamashiach ben Yosef, the promised prophet of Moses. So please stay tuned. Much more coming up.